Hello, and welcome to the Manifestor Only podcast. Today, I have Kelsey, a 5-2 emotional manifester. Welcome, Kelsey.
Thanks, Jessica.
I'm so excited to have you here. And so, I would love it if you could just start off by introducing yourself in whatever way feels the most natural to you.
Yeah, cool. Um, I have defined G, and a lot of times when this comes up, I tend to when an open-ended introduction request comes, I tend to just take this linear route through my trajectory to where I am today. So I guess I'll start with early adulthood, pre-Saturn return. I was a high school music teacher. As you said, I'm a 5-2 emotional manifester, so I'm a non-sacral, and being a high school music teacher, I taught choir primarily, was way more than I could manage on a consistent basis. And so I think I spent 8 or 9 years in the classroom and had a very rude awakening, a shattering, if you will, even though it was pre-human design awareness around my identity with that and my lack of capacity for that, because it had been what I'd been working to for so long. And this was maybe 2015 through 2018 or 19 or something was kind of my slow shattering and transitioning out of that. And where I kind of landed after that was in the healing arts space. I'd already had a long-term yoga practice. I'd been kind of studying astrology. I'd done some Reiki training. I've played with tarot for a long time. I guess that was probably one of my first esoteric modalities, but tarot has never spoken to me to quite the level of depth and naturalness that all these other systems have. So it's tarot, astrology, Reiki, yoga were primary practices of mine. And then one of the things that I started doing near the end of my teaching career was I co-founded a nonprofit healing arts space in Chicago where I used to live. And so that was kind of the thing that got all of my attention and energy after I stopped teaching full time. And I had that space, that community, and that brick and mortar as I became a yoga teacher and as I started practicing and teaching astrology and practicing and teaching Reiki. And so that was, yeah, just a really lovely landing spot. And I have always identified as a teacher. So I think that's why I start with the fact that I went to school for music education and started my uh, adult life as a high school music teacher, because it definitely is teaching, just teaching and sharing what I'm passionate about, disseminating information has always been a huge part of what I do and identify with. And then it was while I was kind of in that in-between space, sort of in this kind of administrative directorial co-founder position, but also transferring my teaching skill set and interest to the healing arts from music, that I found human design. I think I never know whether to call the start of my experiment 2019 or 2020, because what's really the starting point got serious in late 2020. And yeah, just kind of I started to see how even though there's a lot that I would have been and would remain critical about in regards to the institution of education in the US, I started to see with my human design experiment that it was not only, or maybe even primarily, that the education system is problematic or broken. It was also that I am not built or designed for that kind of role. And so I started to see in managing this healing arts nonprofit community and in having all these different roles within it as a teacher, I started to see my own burnout tendencies and my own responsibility to learn to manage my own rhythms and trust my design, if you will. And so, had another little mini shattering around that. And since then, I guess this is why I provide a bunch of context when asked to introduce myself, because I don't know what to call myself label wise, even though I have a defined G. Um, because even since going fully self-employed, which has been the last, I don't know, maybe 4 years ish, I still am like, I'm not a consulting astrologer. I'm not a horoscopic astrologer. Like, I used to do one-on-ones. That was like how I made money for the beginning of self-employment, exclusively one-on-ones. But the more I decondition, I'm like, that's draining. And also as a manifestor, you can probably relate to this. Like, I can't do the same thing. So there's no like anytime I arrive to like, this is the structure that works for me. Nowadays, I'm like, maybe for the next couple months, like, so yeah, it's hard to say what it is I do. I call myself a cosmic contextualizer because even though human design has maybe, at least in this moment in time, come to the forefront of all my modalities, it's kind of like the main barometer through which all my other esoteric practices have to filter through. And I would say maybe not even human design itself is the filter, just my design, has become the filter. Um, so yeah, I do think of myself as a human design professional, and I have been like certified to some extent through IHDS, but mostly I'm just like using these different cosmic languages to make sense of my reality and to share that sense making with others. And I love like initiating people into either their design or their astrology or just this way of perceiving reality and perceiving the world using these languages and tools. But I think I'm kind of transitioning a little bit away from seeing myself as a person that has to teach the language and the skill specifically, and towards seeing myself as a person who uses those languages and those skills to teach or share something kind of greater and beyond. So, cosmic contextualizer, I've used the language sacred pattern recognition as like the thing that I do, but I'm always just playing with fun ways to talk about it because I don't think that whatever the thing is I do really has a name in any kind of like widely understood sense. So hopefully that's a good starting point for people to get to know me. I'm sure I'll share a lot more.
Love it. Yeah, that was great. I think, that's really what I hope people can come to this podcast and see is that, we have this language of human design and we're like, oh, well, she's a 5-2 emotional manifestor. She's got these things to find, but it's like, there's a whole life behind that. There's a lot going on that led to this point of finding human design. And, right now you're in a new era of creating life, which I find fascinating because I am not a mother. And I would love us to start off with, one of those silly is a stupid word because it's just stupid, but the stupid rumors out there is like, oh, well, if you're a manifestor or if you're a projector or a non-sacral or a reflector, you shouldn't have kids. And I find that to be so detrimental to people's experience of this system. And here you are, 8 months.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, it's by weeks.
Yeah, I know. I can't do the week thing.
Because I think they actually consider pregnancy to be 10 months. So I would be 9 months, but colloquially 1 month away, 8 months. Yeah.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, you said earlier before we started recording the weeks, and I'm just like, okay, what does that mean?
Yeah. About a month away from the due date. Yeah.
Yes. And so how has that been for you?
Oh my gosh, it's been so many things. There have been so many stages of it. It does not go fast. People say it goes fast. It did not go fast. It hasn't been painstakingly slow either, but like when I think back to the beginning of it, that was like a whole completely different chapter than where I am now. I hate I don't even know if I'd say like hate. That's an impassioned word. These days, I just kind of like neutrally, as neutrally as possible, roll my eyes when I see that kind of. Can I swear?
Yes, you can swear.
Okay, when I see that kind of homogenized bullshit about what people should and shouldn't do based on their design, because that's just like so mental, and it's hard for me to understand how people. To me, it's just kind of a sign that like the person sharing this dogmatic homogenized viewpoint should and shouldn'ts based on like aspects of design It's a little bit of a pink flag that they're not really embodied and they don't really understand differentiation, which embodiment and differentiation are probably the two main pillars of the human design system. So yeah, I just roll my eyes at that shit. And it happens all the time with like people say things about motivation, they say things about your authority, they say things about certain behaviors. And I'm just like, how do you not see that that's a mental construct? Anyways, but that being said, as I was deconditioning, I would say the first like probably 2 years of my experiment were almost entirely like my conscious awareness was almost entirely focused on deconditioning as a manifester and even more specifically as a non-sacral, or less specifically, I guess, as a non-sacral. And so as I like got to know my closedness and got to know the frequency of anger, which it took me some time to really connect to, and started to understand what's at the root of that anger, and it having to do with this like impatience for having to respond. And as I got to like really know the feeling of that resistance and that irritation, it feels more like irritation to me, in my body, I absolutely had a lot of questions around like, could I ever be a parent? Like, I don't know, like how do manifestors do it?
Mm.
You know, but, and I have, as we were talking about before we started recording, I have innocence motivation. So I never really knew whether I wanted to. I had a lot of like fear and hesitation around all sorts of different aspects of pregnancy and birth and parenting. I still have those things, but I understand now that they're mental, you know?
Yeah.
And I understand I embrace choicelessness a lot more now. So I can kind of see how it's like I was never from a mental place in control of whether or not I was going to get pregnant and pursue parenthood. Um, so yeah, it's just I would say the main thing about my experience of pregnancy so far has just been from the very beginning, I was calling it like it's a PhD in surrender. You know, it's just more surrender. And so a lot of like fears have come up that I didn't have to face prior to conceiving, that I have no choice now but to face. And I feel so grateful that I had this like foundation of surrender, that I've been a muscle that I've been strengthening for the 5 years of my human design experiment. I'm so grateful that I have that. You know, I'm so grateful that I'm like so deeply attuned to surrender and that I've become so aware of the distinction between my mind and my not self, which for me really lives in my undefined ajna, since that's the top center on my personal not self hierarchy. So I'm just like so aware of like the frequency and the feeling of mental distortion now, that even though my experience of pregnancy has not in any way been free of like fear or what I sometimes call like a mental storm, I know that that's what's happening. And so I can detach from it at least enough to let it pass, and also recognize that like this that's one of the biggest gifts of human design, I think, is like this is just what's happening. This is like whatever's happening is just what's happening. And so I can honor my very human process of like suffering through it, my emotional authority process of needing time to like let myself feel a bunch of different ways about something. But ultimately, there's like this feeling of just like trust and safety that's always somewhere in the background. And to me, that's like the liberation of passenger consciousness and the liberation of no choice. So yeah, it's just really felt like being pregnant to me has felt like just the next setting for me to practice shit I've been practicing for like 15 years, you know, with mindfulness and yoga, aparigraha, non-grasping, the Sanskrit word for non-attachment, pretty much, and then human design. I'm so grateful to have like attuned to the map of my own design to be able to embrace the like very real journey of surrender that has been pregnancy and that I'm sure will also be parenthood.
Oh, beautiful. I think you mentioned that anger part, and I would love to dive a little bit into that, because anger seems to be one of those topics that Well, again, like you said, that also becomes like this mind thing where we just have this notion of, well, anger is this one thing. And so what does anger feel like to you? How have you, cultivated getting in touch with that anger? And then on the other side, what does peace feel like to you?
Yeah. Such an important thing for manifestors to explore. I think for all types too, like understanding the baggage that these words that we use in human design, like our signature, and not self themes, especially, they're when they first hit us, they've got all this baggage. They've got all these like homogenized versions of them that we're gonna have to process through our body and through our experiment. And yeah, I think it was years into my experiment before I like really felt my distilled, differentiated experience of anger and peace. And two of my greatest teachers, I just want to recognize some of the people, some of the fellow manifestors that have helped me access that awareness about anger and peace, have been Alokanon Diaz, who has been a primary teacher for me, and then also my friend Singh. Do you know Singh?
Yeah, I
Is Singh going
do.
to be on the pod?
I mean, no, actually, thank you. I need more male voices on here. Why haven't I reached out to him? Shit. Yes, I know how.
Yeah. So both emotional manifestors, both men. Alok's a 1-3 emotional manifestor. I think triple split. Sings a 5-1 emotional manifestor. I think single deaf. I don't know why I'm deciding to share their splits or not. But anyways, yeah, Alok really helped me understand that anger is connected to impatience. That was something that he taught that really helped me, because I've always identified as a very impatient person. For anyone astrologically literate, I have Sun, Mercury, and Venus in Aries, which is a pretty impatient energy, ruled by Mars in and Mercury in Gemini, which is also like a very kind of quick, impatient energy. And that's like most of my chart right there is those 5 really significant personal planets in these very impatient signs. And so when Alok was able to connect the idea of anger and impatience for me, it like lit a lot up. And I already was really aware of the mechanics of the closed aura by then. So I understood why manifestors might get very irritated or angry and at impatience, because we're just being moved by this like urge, as most people call it, from within, this like internal cue that's like, we don't know why this is happening. We don't even know exactly what's happening. We just need to know, we just know this is happening through my body now. And resistance, right, is anything outside of our aura kind of getting in the way of us carrying that sensation, that urge to form, to manifestation. And we're literally designed to be able to make it happen at its will, right? At the internal will of this cue that we have, which is not us and is not our mind. And so that's part of why we're closed. The closed aura, it pushes, it repels in order to make space in front of us for us to be able to bring the thing forward, to remove resistance. And I also think of the closed aura as like protecting us from having to respond to everything outside of us, because having to respond to things outside of us also creates resistance to our natural rhythm, which is we're either initiating or we're not. And when we're not initiating, we're designed to be at rest, period, which is like such a hard thing for so many manifestors, self included, to acknowledge and own and surrender to. So yeah, just like the theme of like Alok bringing up impatience was like really helpful for me, because I could identify the frequency of impatience, no problem. And when I understood that that was at the root of all anger, I was like, okay, yeah, right. And like some of the examples I sometimes use to talk about this are the things that have made me the most angry throughout my life. The two very trivial seeming things are being in a dressing room and like getting stuck in a dress or a shirt or something. And I just like get so heated with like raging anger. And then what's the other thing? Like I think traffic. Oh no. Troubleshoot. Traffic is an example that I think Singh used or someone used, but troubleshooting technology, when there's just like something kind of wrong and I can't figure it out. I just get so like, I just can't stand it. Right. And that has also helped me see that the anger is not personal, which isn't to say that there aren't instances of manifestors like spewing their anger in the direction of people as blame. But I think part of why, the manifestor feels kind of predatory or threatening to people is part of it is the anger. The anger is like scary to people. And I can recognize that even if I'm not feeling that it's personal, the person outside my aura might not realize that, right? They just can tell I'm going to impact them and they're kind of scared because they can't tell what's happening except that I'm angry. But my anger is never, it very rarely feels directed at a person. I shouldn't say never, but it very rarely feels directed at a person. It feels directed at this resistance that's getting in the way of my body just trying to do this thing. And then just to mention Sing used an example when we were in person once of it was traffic. That's where it came from. He was like struggling to get to this event. There was like an Uber issue, there was traffic. And also on his way out the door, he realized his shoe was untied. And that, to me, that was also just kind of like adding to this picture that was becoming clear for me of like, anger is literally just about when we meet resistance, because what's trying to be birthed through us is not waiting. Like, it's ready now. And it's not mental, like I've been thinking lately too about how the way we refer to not self themes for the types, we sometimes seem to suggest that like if you're in anger as manifestor, bitterness as a projector, whatever, that it's like you're in the not self. And I think that might be a little misleading because when I feel angry, it's because my body is trying to surrender to the thing that's trying to happen, and there's something outside of me that's stopping. And like how much more like self could that be? It's my body reacting the way that it does as a manifestor with a closed aura to something stopping me from my natural movement of initiation, or just to kind of complete the thought, rest, because it also makes me angry to have to respond when there's no energy for something in my body, when I'm meant to be in stillness and gestation and rest.
Yeah. I can't drive anymore. Like, I will try my best to not have to drive. My husband does all the driving because traffic is my thing. I cannot deal. It's like if I'm finally moving somewhere and I'm getting that car and I'm going somewhere and someone doesn't use their blinker or they're driving too slow, or not too slow as in I need to speed. I don't speed, but it's like the speed limit is 60 and you're going 50. Why the fucking hell? It's like, shit, get out of my way, move. And I find it so funny because that's, one of the things that Raw talks about is like the manifestor is coming, let's honk and get out of the way. But they don't always get out of the way in traffic, unfortunately.
Totally. Yeah, my partner's always like, you don't like to wait. He's always saying that to me. And I say it too. I'm like, I don't like to wait. So like if we're in line somewhere, I don't get like irate, but I do start to like huff and puff a little bit. Like there's just this uneasiness, when it's like time to move towards something and there's anything in my way. And I've like cultivated a lot of compassion for myself for that, since understanding human design, and compassion for the people on the other side of it too, because now I just know that's just how my body works. I'm not designed to wait, and I'm not a selfish asshole just for that alone, at least, It's just the mechanics of my form.
I appreciate you reframing anger and the not self, because that's something that I've also contemplated a lot. And a lot of the manifestors that come to me and work with me, they're always just like, oh, but I'm always, there's just so much anger, and the anger is, I shouldn't be angry. And it's like, who says you shouldn't be angry? Yeah. It's telling you something.
I think like as emotional beings too, like part of what we are forced to reckon with, and therefore what we're kind of able to share with the world, is like, it's not so much about avoiding the not self theme, because that's resisting and repressing a true part of our experience. It's about allowing that to be a part of the truth and a part of the waves, so that it can alchemize, so that it can move through our body, so that it can deepen our sense of awareness about how we move through reality and who we are. That's a lot of what Allison and I focused on at the end of this offering for fifth lines that we did. Heretic Haven is like, yeah, fifth lines, let's go ahead and acknowledge the pain of this experience. And I say the same thing as a manifestor and to other manifestors. There's a very valid grief that I think many of us need to move through around the isolation of the closed door. And we need to move through it. Like it's a part of our truth that needs to be acknowledged, but we also can move through it. Like, so it's not about demonizing the not self theme or even making a problem of the parts of us that feel victim to our design or victim to reality. It's about allowing those parts of us to rise to the surface of our awareness and our experience so that they can continue to cycle, they can continue to process, and we can alchemize them or transmute them into acceptance over and over and over again. And it's only from that place of acceptance that we can then truly like take responsibility, for our own design and for our own awareness and our own life experience.
Yeah, that's so true. And it's so easy to not want to go there. I think, at least for me, growing up, I always, when I speak about anybody who has raised me, I say everything with love. And I understand that they were never, ever trying to do anything other than love me the best way they knew possible. I just need to put that out there. And my grandmother is a splenic projector and my mother is a manifesting generator. Both of them, of course, undefined emotional centers. And so for me, it was like the grief of being a manifestor, and then also the grief of having people tell me to suck it up, buttercup, not accepting my emotional wave, not accepting my emotionality. And, I'm in 1949, 1222. I mean, there's a fucking load of emotionality there. And you also have that wonderful 3955 and also the 3740, which is just like, there's a lot of emotions going on, both in that individuality and that tribalness, and allowing myself to feel the grief of that, allowing myself to go through, okay, you know what? There were parts of my childhood where that wasn't accepted. And now I have to learn to remother myself and accept that, because it's like you said, on the other side of going through that grief is acceptance. And I wouldn't say I'm done with that process. I think that's going to be a long ass process, but going through that and really honoring the fact that the first thing I feel when I'm starting to feel angry or I'm starting to feel anything really is a shame that, oh no, I'm not supposed to feel this. I'm supposed to just suck it up and pretend like nothing, but then allowing myself to, fetal position, bawl and cry for no fucking reason. Like here the other day, I'm watching the docuseries, Dallas Cowboy Cheerleaders.
I watched it and I loved it.
It was beautiful. I absolutely loved it too. And I was crying so damn hard.
It's so well done.
It was. And it was just so beautiful. And it was just like it touched so many of my emotions of community and not feeling like I fit in and, kind of giving up on dreams because of that. And it was just such an interesting process. But I notice all the time, every time I go into this flow of crying for quote unquote nothing, it's like, no, there's something and let's just let it flow. So, yeah. But on the other side of anger is peace.
Right. Oh, right. Let's talk about peace. Yeah.
And how does that feel?
Yeah. So peace to me is just like the absence of resistance, whether that resistance is coming from the outside or my not self mind resisting my need for rest or resisting the urge that's coming through, or resisting the months and months where there's no clarity around any urge or anything to initiate.
Mm-hmm.
Like peace. I think that's why the surrender aspect of human design speaks so strongly to me, because for me, peace feels like surrender. I kind of define surrender as the absence of resistance. It's just like being at peace with what is. I also would describe peace as like spaciousness and autonomy and freedom. On a practical level, peace to me looks like being able to look at my Google Calendar and see mostly nothing, because that gives me the confirmation of like clarity and autonomy, or not clarity, spaciousness and autonomy ahead of me, which is like an absolute prerequisite to peace for me, because having a lot on my calendar is just a lot to respond to, even if it's stuff that I like willingly put there, you know? So yeah, spaciousness, absence of resistance. Peace is about being able to go with the flow of my urges and my rests periods on those macro and micro levels, and like trusting that rhythm and not having internal or external interruptions to that.
Yeah, I'm in a season of absolutely nothing is happening. I mean, I'm doing this podcast. It's like, again, that's the only thing that's on my calendar. Like once every other day, someone's booked themselves in to do this podcast, and that's it. And the struggle of my mind of like, you need to be productive. You need to go do something. There needs to be something that's happening. And all my body wants to do is lay on my couch and watch the Dallas Cowboys cheerleader documentary or some other thing, or go for a walk, or do some paintings or drawings, and it's just so intense. And I've been here before, and I'm keep wondering, like, when is that mental part just going to surrender to the fact? And I'm just kind of like, I don't know if that's ever going to happen. And I'm just watching that. My mind is completely obsessed with the fact that I'm no longer acting like a manifesting generator.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. I mean, that identity crisis, that shattering that comes, I always assume around the Saturn return, because that's just what makes sense to me as an astrologer and mechanically, and that has been my experience. But I'm sure there's some differentiation and spectrum with that. But for so many of us manifestors, like we were just living as these super MGs, like the power of the manifestor with the potential of the undefined sacral to amplify and like just completely be disembodied, you know, and like adapt to whatever needed to be done, and then put the force of the manifestor behind that. Like that's a super powered fucking MG. And wow, I feel like, yeah, identified so much with my capability to power through and to constantly perform and handle everything and have such impact in all of the above. It's a really, 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 really hard thing to let go of. And I meant to say this earlier when you asked me about pregnancy too, that I think I started to say it when I talked about like the first 2 years of my experiment being like pretty much just about deconditioning my sacral center. I don't know that I would have been able to handle the way that my first trimester specifically like knocked me out. Like I did nothing for my first trimester. I was finishing up a year-long program that I'd been running, like a container with 15 people in it. So I had like some calls within that and like some responsibilities within that. But for the most part, they were very like when I felt like it, when I had energy, or if they were on the calendar, at least they were people who have been deconditioning with me for a year through human design and astrology and know me and know my rhythm. So it was like much easier to the few people and things that I had obligations to during that first trimester. It was much easier for me to calm the pressure of the mind, because I had set up these circumstances where moving correctly mechanically was what was the only thing expected for anyone, and people knew me well, and they had learned about manifestors, and they et cetera, et cetera. And so yeah, I had like I was pretty sick most of it, but honestly I was just incredibly fatigued and I had no motivation for anything. And I kind of had spent the last few years preparing for that, by getting really used to long stretches of time where I was just on the couch, you know, and getting used to like watching the incessant narratives of my mind shaming me for that and putting more and more distance between those incessant narratives and my recognition of them as like truth. So yeah, I feel like sacral deconditioning was kind of a boot camp that created, and honestly also created the literal space for me to like grow a life, because all those mental fears that I had early in my experiment around like, how do manifestor parents do it? Like, I can't be in response all the time. I got to a point where I'm like, I actually do have some capacity for response now, because I am very discerning about what I allow to task me with response, you know? So I've created so much spaciousness in my life just through this like rigorous cultivation of like trusting my body and trusting these natural rhythms and distrusting the narratives of shame and should around response and showing up and consistency. That it's like it's just created such space, I think, for like literal new life, you know, to come through. And nowadays I feel like I mean, I'm sure I'm going to be fucking exhausted, and it's going to be a whole new journey with non-sacral deconditioning and surrender. And no way mean to say that like parenthood is going to be, you know, a breeze. But I do feel like I trust myself to be able to move through the anger of it and the exhaustion of it with a level of like integrity to stay true to my form and my own needs, and also with a level of detachment from the part of it that is probably going to feel like a mental problem a lot of the time. Um, sorry, I just went in a new trajectory, manifestor style. I can't remember. Oh, yeah, just your own experience of like dealing with the shame and the grief around like just not being as capable as we thought we were in our 20s.
Absolutely. It took me a while. It was Human Design found me when I was 34. And it was right after I had burnt down, not literally, but metaphorically, my franchised coffee shop. And that year that we were in business, it was such an uphill battle. And I'm so grateful for my partner. He is a manifesting generator. There were so many days where I just had to send him to go to work for me because he's a wedding photographer. And so he had a lot of time in the weeks because he works weekends. But it was right after I had closed that down where Human Design found me. And I thought I was going insane. And as a 6'2", you know, what I learned quickly was like, oh, I'm going on the roof. And oh, there's this whole new process of being completely aloof to life, on top of the fact that I'm not meant or built to consistently do shit. And I have an undefined ego over here. And so for me, it was like always working so fucking hard to prove myself. Those beautiful, wonderful, undefined sacral. I mean, and my sacral, as you can see when you're looking at my chart, it's
lit up.
It's so
very lit up.
I have what, like 6 or 7 activations in those 5 gates that are there or something. It's like outrageous. And so it's been, and it continues to be one of the most intense parts of my life, is letting go of that. And when Human Design came, it took a while, but it was easier when I really started to surrender to the mechanics and like, okay, let's test this thing. Let's really test the system and figure out if it's true or not. And when I started to notice it was true, especially the repelling aura part that I absolutely didn't want to look at, is like, no, I don't want to be repelling. I want to be that open book and that beautiful, warm hug of a generator, you know. But no, it was so true, because I would see how differently people would react to my partner or my husband and me, and just noticing that. And like, there is no reason that this should be, that you're supposed to be all, oh, lovey-dovey with him and then cold stone with me, you know?
Totally. My partner is also a generator. And in our case, he's a 6'3" and I'm a 5'2", so he's particularly respected and adored while I'm like activating and threatening to most people.
Yes, I hear you on that. It's like we have, we moved here in March and our neighbors, I mean, even their kids are terrified of me, but I'm just like, dude, I'm nothing to be scared of. I'm really not. I just don't have the capacity to stand here and small talk and chit chat
Yeah.
with everybody.
I'm in a season of life where like withdrawal is feeling really good. Um, and some of that I kind of associate with just being a second line body who's deconditioning back to honoring the needs of the hermit. I also have a lot of astrological context for it. Like Saturn is transiting the bottom of my chart, my IC, my fourth house. So just bringing a lot of weight to like the private part of my life, the innermost self. And also, I'm in a balsamic moon phase by progression, which is basically just like tracing the shape of the lunar phase waning and waxing over a 28-year period of your life instead of 28 days. So I'm in balsamic, which is like the darkest, most private, most internal, most behind the veil of a 28-year cycle. And I can just like really feel the weight of that. And I've been feeling the weight of that increase. So for me, it's been really nice. And like all of this is like cosmically timed, of course. So of course it's set up this way, but it's been really nice to have that astrological context to see like there's parts of this massive withdrawal that are really uncomfortable to my mind, but I can feel how enriching and nourishing they are to my body. And then I'm able to feed my mind the astrological context to know like this is not forever, but this is like a part of my process that I'm meant to embrace right now. And so it's been very nice to have all this context while I'm really attuning to my closed aura because I'm mostly like, yeah, go ahead, be afraid because I don't want to be bothered. Like I moved to the desert with my partner in 2020 and I don't know people here and I've made no attempts to get to know anyone here. I've never introduced myself to a neighbor. I have 3 friends here, 2 of them through my partner, and one of them a human design friend that I met in an online class that I see like once every other month. Um, and it's great, and like when I do venture out into the world, I'm pretty much like if somebody approaches me these days, I'm just like, whoa, what do you think you're doing? And I'm also like it's another kind of sign to me that that person is probably pretty disembodied because I'm just in this era of letting the closed aura do its thing and letting it repel. And so when someone initiates with me or like doesn't kind of respect, or maybe a better word is just like feel the closed aura, I'm just like, whoa, what's happening here? No. So it's been nice for me to be able to just kind of embrace it because I really am in a phase of learning to really value the peace that it brings me and the lack of resistance that it offers me to just live inside this brick wall, as Holly Marie calls it, and like let people leave me alone.
Yes, no, I hear you on that. Same here. Like I said, we moved here, well, in March. And so my husband's a 1-3 and he's a narrow valley environment. And I am Shores and a 6-2. I have no intention of going out there, becoming friends with anybody. And he goes to the climbing gym and suddenly he has like 4 new friends that he's bumped into and, had these deep conversations with. And there was a point where I kind of had to show up because he was like, I don't think they believe me when I say I have a wife. It's like, because he doesn't wear his wedding ring either when he's climbing, right? And so he's like talking about this wife, and they're just kind of like, is she a fictive character of your imagination, or does she actually exist? Does she ever come climbing with you? And so there was one night they were going to go out for drinks, and I'm just like, yeah, I can drive you guys. That's fine. Okay, I'll prove them that I'm a real person. But no, and the same, I was out the mall here the other day, just wandering around with my headset on. And this guy just comes up to me who's working there, and he's just doing his job. And I have all the grace for the fact that he's just doing his job. But I'm like, I have my headset on. Why the fuck are you talking to me? Is that not sign enough? And how are you not feeling that I do not want you here? He's just like, let me know if you need anything. And I'm just like, I will.
Yeah. Yeah, I could so relate to that. That's like one of my favorite times to experiment with the closed door is like solicitors or something. And I'm not rude ever, but like I really have given myself permission to not perform openness. You know, I've given myself permission to be pretty curt. I don't even know exactly what curt means, but I think I'm using it correctly. Just pretty short and direct with like, no, thank you, carry on. And sometimes people, I don't know what things are like where you live, but in the States, sometimes people are very pressing with soliciting and stuff or like door knocking and stuff. And there was one time I was unloading groceries out of my trunk and I got some door knockers coming up and I had headphones in and I was like, I'm just going to pretend I don't see or hear them. And I just did. And I felt kind of bad about it, but I was like,
no,
let me just embrace the mechanics here. Like, I'm not going to respond to you. You're initiating. It doesn't feel right. I'm just going to completely ignore you. And like, they tried to talk to me for a second and then they walked away. And, you know, like a couple years ago, I would have never even thought, you know, like just especially probably as conditioned and raised as female manifestors, you know, we're like conditioned to be so accommodating. And I can't remember where I first heard the phrase performance of openness. I wish I could credit someone with that because that's been something that's really stuck with me as well. And it's another thing that I know the frequency of that. Like I know what it feels like to perform openness and the distinction between a performance of openness and like truly creating space for people to engage with my aura because it's what I want. On my own terms. I use the language on my own terms a lot when I'm talking about the manifestor experience. And I also know the feeling of performing openness because I want to, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like because I can kind of go into, maybe it's a little bit of a fifth line thing too, but I can kind of go into this like performance. I'm like putting my arms out in this dramatic way of openness because I want to welcome people in. Like I want to intrigue people. I want people to feel safe around me. But if I don't want to do that, then I'm not going to do it. You know, then I'm going to just let the closedness take care of me and the other. And it helps to remember that like my mechanics aren't just for me, right? Like the manifestor as a starting point, not performing openness or not responding or not suppressing our urges is creating the conditions for anyone who comes into contact with our aura to also be mechanically correct for themselves, you know? So a lot of my process has been around like trusting that when I'm trying to negotiate with the non-negotiable truth of my own mechanics, I'm putting myself and everyone around me in a position where distorted relating is the only option. And so that's helped me take a lot of the like weight of the guilt and the right and wrong and the pressure to perform openness and be accommodating beyond what I have capacity for off of me, because I know that like if I entertain someone initiating with me in a way that like does really feels like incorrect, then I'm just opening us both up to a distorted experience. So I'll take responsibility for my end of it and just honor the closedness and move on.
Yeah, that's a great way to see, you know, again, to reframe the whole closed aura thing. Because it doesn't feel good when people, you know, I just put on a conference this April, and that was like, and I was the MC of my own conference. And that was the hardest part for me was I love that phrase of performing openness, of not doing that, of just allowing myself. For example, I have this there was this situation that I really had to sit with afterwards because it was so uncomfortable for me to actually not perform. But I was sitting with a couple of friends, and you know, the thing about putting on a conference is that everybody knows you, but I don't know everybody. And I absolutely love everybody that came and supported and wanted to learn. And I think it was an amazing experience. But it also was the experience of people coming up to me because they know me. And I'm like, who the fuck are you? You know, and I'm gracefully trying to meet them with a smile and be like, I'm on my way. I don't have time for this kind of thing. But there was one specific situation where I'm sitting and I'm talking to my projector friend, and these people come up to the sofa, and we're just like, oh, we're excited and we can't wait for the conference. And this was like the night before. And old me would have been like, oh, hi, come sit down, come join us, be here, yay, you know. And I was just like, I could feel that going on in my mind, but there was nothing in my body that was moving me. I was just like, you know, and my projector friend was just like trying to move over, and I just pulled him back. I'm like, sit. This is not happening right now. This is not what is going on right now. And then I had to really work through that shame, because like you said, as a female manifestor, especially, where it's just like, oh, you better conform, you better be that nice girl, you better be that people pleaser, just really make sure that everybody's okay. And also, you know, undefined solar plexus mother, who I absolutely love and adore, and she's amazing. There was quite a numerous times where she was like, well, what did you do wrong to make them not like you? And so sitting with that uncomfortableness of just like, that's what's going on here now.
We're so afraid of our impact. Like we're always trying to like make ourselves small to avoid impact, but like impact happens. It just happens. We can't stop it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, I've learned so much from specifically the in-person experiences, like with other people who speak human design too. There's just something about like everyone being conscious of it and interacting and having like feeling a little bit more free to experiment with being closed, because you know people know you're a manifestor, so let me see what it feels like to kind of embrace that. And I also think there's gradients to it and levels to it, right? Because like in my experience, when I initiate something, like whether it's an online container or an in-person thing, it doesn't mean that like, okay, I've initiated this, so now everything inside of it is correct for me to engage with and respond to, but it can mean that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I when I'm working with students in a student capacity or a mentorship capacity, and I'm teaching them about manifestors, you know, and like neutral information and like how anger is connected sometimes to this expectation of response. I sometimes see their minds get really like, okay, let me be really careful how I talk to Kelsey, you know. And I experienced the same thing. I went to one of the high desert human design conferences back in like 2021 or 2022. I can't remember when I went. And I noticed like when because people knew I was a manifestor, there was kind of like what I thought at the time, and I think to some extent I was probably right, what I read as this like mental fear of approaching me because they quote know they're not supposed to, and I didn't like that feeling either.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, maybe at the time I wasn't as attuned to the mechanics of the closed aura, so maybe I misread some of it too, but I remember, yeah, just feeling like there was a lot of like mental rules as well around not approaching me, and I didn't like that. So it's just another one of those things where it's like we have to be mindful, or we benefit from being mindful of the fact that all of these concepts within human design, including the way we articulate mechanics, they have to go through the filter of mind. And the filter of mind is always going to create rules and shoulds and rights and wrongs because it can only operate on the binary. And so just, yeah, to be mindful that like it's about the felt sensation. It's about the discernment of frequency in our own form and outside of our form. It's not necessarily about the right way, you know, to engage. And what I end up telling like people who work with me is like, I'm sharing this with you because this is how I function. I'm informing you. I will disappear for days at a time. I will not always respond. I'm informing you because I'm teaching you human design, that neutrally informing manifestors can alleviate a lot of resistance and anger for them, and alleviate a lot of maybe bitterness or disappointment or frustration for you. But that being said, like I'm responsible for how I engage with or don't engage with people asking me questions or tasking me with response. So you're still only responsible for moving through the world correctly according to your strategy and authority. Don't try not to get in your head about like how you approach me or how you phrase things to me. And like I love workshopping. How can we turn this into neutral information? That's like fun for me because I don't find it easy myself to shift from asking a manifestor a question to neutrally informing. I like trying it because I can literally feel a difference in my body when we find the right wording. And that's just like cool, very cool to me to see how that works. It teaches me about my mechanics and my form. But yeah, ultimately, like it's an experiment. Like we have to bump into shit. And one thing that was really useful for me at some point was like I just decided that all information coming to me was neutral because I found myself like getting angry when people would like I was getting angry for a while at getting invited to weddings. Like that was bringing up anger in my body to receive a wedding invitation, right? And so I realized like okay, this is neutral information, or at least I have to receive it as neutral information because it's my own not self shit that's so wrapped up in like my sacral gate is the 59. So feeling like I have to be available for this intimate relating with everyone when I don't always actually have that capacity or that energy or that availability. And then I get all up in my head with my only other two undefined centers, the head and the ajna, where I just like can't stop fixating on what's the right, appropriate, moral, ethical way to deal with this. And that removes me so much from the mechanics of my form and like my natural rhythms and what I do have capacity for and don't. So yeah, at some point I was just like, okay, anything anyone ever asks of me or invites me to or requests of me, it's all neutral information. And like, while I am so grateful for the people in my life who have learned, like my partner who has like really, I don't want to say mastered, but has like is very intentional when he can be about informing me instead of asking me or putting me in response. I'm so grateful for that and it feels amazing. But I can't expect the world to neutrally inform me, right? It's my responsibility to just receive everything as neutral information and respond or not on my own terms. That's not for anyone else to like necessarily discern but me. And that's been really freeing. And I just don't really answer emails anymore. It's one result of that.
Oh, that's really great. Yeah. Getting mad because people are inviting you to your wedding. I think that's hilarious. But it's true though. It is a reframe that needs to happen for us. And I agree, having a partner that is open to experimenting with this is absolutely beautiful. I also have a partner who he got he got a reading very early on. And the reading was of course about him, but he was also like, how can I relate to this manifestor thing? And one of the things that the teacher was like, you know, he started talking about, like, for example, when we're going to eat dinner, you know, I'll say, well, do you want this? Or do you want that? Or do you want this? And she just can never make up her mind. Why can't she just say what she wants? And the teacher was just like, well, first of all, she's emotional. So, you know, that's not going to work. And second of all, you're bursting all of these questions at this manifestor is just going to dig their heels in and be like, fuck no, go away. And so now he's like, I'm going to make some XYZ and it's going to be done in around 30 to 40 minutes. And then silence.
I just love it. It just feels so good to be informed. It feels so good.
And 10 minutes later, I'll be like, yeah, I would like some of that. Or no, I'm not hungry. You know,
It puts us in a position to be able to respond. And I'm not saying that in a mechanical sense, but to respond to what's happening outside of us on our own terms. Like it gives our own bodies the ability to register the parameters for our next movement, for our next like organic movement. So yeah, I mean, that's another thing that I'm like, I want people in the human design world to know that I don't want to be left out. I don't want you to like completely leave me alone. I mean, some people I do, but like for the most part, I enjoy being informed. Like, but there's a, and I think this is important too, like to bring it back to it's about frequency and an embodied sensation, not about how we actually articulate. And like I say that loosely because truly certain articulations feel good to my body. But I can also feel whether someone has an expectation of me responding or how I respond. And it doesn't really matter how you word it. If I can feel, I call it an energetic leash. That's what I call it. If I can feel like somebody like trying to like lasso me in a specific way, if I can feel the absence of their openness to however I do or don't respond, like then it just feels icky and it puts me in a position where I feel like there's no way that I could even respond now that would feel correct for both of us. And it just, yeah, it makes me angry because it's like, I might have wanted to do what you wanted me to do, but now I don't have the chance to because I can't feel into it because there's no autonomous way for me to move forward. Is this making sense?
Yeah, what I'm hearing you say is like if someone is manipulating their words in a way because they know you're a manifester, and so it's like, oh, if I do it this way, then I can maybe.
Yeah, well,
Get
actually, it's interesting because I sometimes think that that's what neutral informing for people who understand what they're doing is. It is this kind of like manipulation. And I don't actually really mind that.
Okay.
It's just if the person has an attachment or an expectation to how I'm going to respond, whether they're conscious of it or not, it just feels like it completely removes the possibility or the potential for me to move forward in a way that feels good to both of us. So for me, it's more about like people showing up and whether they're asking me a question, making a request, or neutrally informing me, however they're phrasing it, if they truly value my autonomy and are like okay with receiving or not receiving whatever comes through from me, then I don't give a fuck if you put it in a yes or no question. You know, I don't really give a fuck if you asked me something specifically or you asked me to respond to something, because if I can trust, and maybe it's a trust, maybe it's built on a foundation, or maybe it's just a, splenic hit that I get, like my own, I have taste cognition too. So maybe it's just like how it tastes to me in that moment. Whatever it is, if my gauge on it is that like you're asking me a question, but you're not gonna, maybe there's some fifth line stuff in here too. You're not gonna punish me, right? You don't have a specific expectation for me. You're not gonna punish me if I don't meet your expectations. Then I have like no then I usually have the energy to whether I'm responding the way they want me to or not, or affirmatively or not. I usually have the energy to at least give some information and like be in communication and be in connection. But anytime there's like that need, that like thirsty little need, that energetic leash where I can feel someone's attached to the outcome of what will or won't come from me, then I'm just like, it feels like resistance. Like it just feels like this like thing tying, it feels in my way. It feels like something in my way. And it starts to, I guess, create anger, to bring it back to anger.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I get you. I got you. Oh my gosh, because that fifth line, I mean, I know you talked about that in thousands of different ways, but when when I hear you speak about that, it's like that expectation that someone might have to a question. How, hmm, okay, let me rephrase. I have so many fifth five ones in my life. As a 6'2", that's very natural. And it's so interesting to see how my mind will put them on a pedestal or villainize them. And I've done that with you. I've done that with every fifth line in my whole entire network. It's just the way it is. But that's only through my mind. It really is. And it's so interesting when I can notice that, oh, like, okay, for example, I hope this doesn't make you uncomfortable, but one of the pedestals I put you on is that you're so articulate in the words you use in your Instagram posts. And I'll be like, and this might be me also being compromised in your 1-8 because I have the 8, but just like, oh my God, I wish I could do that. And she's so good at doing that. And the way she uses words and la, 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 la. And just like, oh, Kelsey is this perfect wordsmith person, and it's just like, up there. And then I'll just notice that going on in my head. And it's just like, wow, that is so fucking interesting to notice, because that's just like, that's me seeing you, but that there might not be any truth in you that that is your reality, right? And I want to bring this over to you being a solo entrepreneur, which of course, that's what manifestors are told from the get-go. It's like, well, if you're a manifestor, you should work for yourself. Not every manifestor can do that, of course, but you've made that work. And what we talked a little bit before we started recording was that the way I see it, and this is, I don't know if this is a pedestal or what it is, but it's just something that I've observed that seems true to me about you, is that your business is based off of reputation. And just to give people some background story, I was in a container called the Not Self Bestie with you, Allison, and Amanda. And it was an amazing experience. I really enjoyed it. And what I was noticing was I felt I was the only person who didn't know someone else in class. And every time someone would talk about you or how they found this Not Self Bestie program, it was like, oh, well, that person told me about it, or this person told me about it. And so first of all, does that feel true to you, that you've built your business on reputation?
Well,
And
let me start with, oh, go ahead.
No, and also just like, what is it like being a solo entrepreneur as a manifestor?
So let me just start small with Not Self Bestie. I don't think you were the only person that didn't know someone. I will say, I don't think that was even, I don't think more than half the people knew someone else, but I did teach it inside of this year-long container that I mentioned earlier. So definitely a good portion of those people were people who were working with me and in a group. And then we opened it up to the public. So that's part of what you were sensing for sure. Like there were previous relationships, but I think Allison and Amanda each brought probably about as many people from the public sphere. But it did exist as like a guest workshop inside a container I was already doing. So that's definitely something you were sensing. And I do get a lot of repeat people. Like people tend to go through like a phase where they're working with me, and they'll like, a lot of people will take everything I'm offering for a 3-month, 6-month, 2-year period and then like piece the fuck out. And I won't like ever hear from them again, or it'll be years before we're reconnected. So that's a thing. I don't know what that is. Probably a manifestor thing to some extent, probably a fifth line thing. Definitely all the things, right? All the mechanics.
Stranger of consequence, fifth lines.
Yeah. Well, exactly. Yeah. Like there's a certain point where we call it, I think Allison termed this in Here to Cave in, the stranger sparkle wears off. And then we're just like not that impactful anymore. And then the bigger question, does it feel true that I built my business on reputation? I just have never thought about it that way. So I can't say yes or no, because it's just kind of a new conceptualization for me. I think it's probably to some extent the only option for fifth lines, right? Because it's like we play this character that's not totally detached from the truth of who we are, but it's like an extension. I think at least this is where I'm at right now with fifth line stuff for myself. It's like the projection's going to happen. It's mechanical, just like the repulsion's going to happen. The impact's going to happen. It's mechanical. I can control it. So if I can kind of embrace it and lean into it, then maybe I can, to my mind's experience, like work with it intentionally, right? And so I can show up as the character that I want to play, so that the projections and expectations that are coming towards me at any given point match the character that I'm wanting to work with for this season. You know, like there's a reason fifth lines are projection magnets, and it's because the mysticism, the like thick cloud of the projection field helps us perform our karmic role as heretics. And so embracing it like lately I've just been like, let me just be honest about how I want to impact people and what I do and don't want to deal with, so that the expectations that people naturally come to in regards to what are they going to get out of working with me at least can more closely match the shit that I'm in the mood to perform and intend, you know, which is, it's probably not going to completely alleviate the experience of like disappointment and villainization that is usually at least a tinge of our experience as fifth lines. But so yeah, and that's just what's coming up in this moment. And I've never really thought that much before about it. Like, is my business built on reputation? But I think you're probably tapping into something fifth liney there, you know, and second liney as well. Like, I'm a little aloof to what people see are my gifts and are unique to me. But other people are seeing that, right? So consciously, I'm a little more tapped into maybe this intentional way of working with the character, maybe so that I can be more comfortable with the projections coming my way. But then unconsciously, there's probably something you're seeing with the two as well there, and the reputation of the way people look at twos.
Mm-hmm.
That is like, oh, this is what they're really good at, right? There, if that feels like there's something there too that I just maybe haven't thought about all that much because we're just like aloof as fuck, the two.
Yes, we are blind
But
to it.
then another thing is like, I love talking to desire motivated people because it's like, I just like can't, I'm like, how, what, you know, I can't, because I have innocence motivation. So for me, like my business isn't built on shit, you know, like my business isn't even a business, you know, it's just like, I stopped having capacity for this. So I stopped doing what I don't have capacity for. And I like make it work. Yeah. But something that I like to be really transparent about is like, I'm not financially successful. Like, I, at one point, I had a savings back when I was still plugged into the matrix in a not self way, and I had a career, quote, a salaried job. I shouldn't say career. I had a salaried job. And ever since then, I've like racked up a good amount of debt, and I go through phases where I clear a bunch of it and then I stack more of it on. And I mean, I'm not, when I say I'm not financially successful, I mean, I am in no way like successful or stable or responsible the way that we're taught to be conventionally. But focusing on that never helped me. And I'm more at peace than I've ever been. And I'm comfortable with having some debt because I have so much peace and I have so much autonomy. And I see that over a very slow amount of time, the financial stuff, like, if it's not getting in order, it's showing me that it's possible for it to get in order in ways that don't ask me to compromise my truth and my capacity. So I just like to be clear about that, like, because I think with the projection, it's really easy to project a certain amount of success onto me that I won't deny, you know, like I feel very comfortable with and grateful for where I am in life, in business, in my deconditioning process, and all the ways that those three things intersect. But like, I have a lot of credit card debt, and I don't know, like, I'm about to go on a 3-month parental leave where the money that I know I have coming in is bare minimum. It's gonna allow me to contribute to groceries and rent the amount that I've been able to for the last few months, and nothing more. So and we're gonna have more expenses. We have a baby coming, you know, like, so it's like, for me, I just want people to know how much of it has been surrender and a leap of faith and calibrating to peace. And that's what success is to me, you know, and that's how I talk about the themes, you know. I might not be able to feel the mechanic of success or the mechanic of satisfaction the way that projectors and generators can, but calibrating to peace for me and trusting peace to be my goalpost and the thing that I'm constantly reattuning to, that is what brings me the version of success and the version of satisfaction, the version of surprise that's available to me. So yeah, for me, and like astrologically speaking, I have Saturn, Uranus, Neptune in the second house. So I won't go into that, but for some people who know what that means, like I was never meant to think about money in a very mental way, in a very conventional way, money or resourceness or stability or material attachment. I'm meant to kind of like learn the hard way over the long stretch of my life how to master that in a way that feels reimaginative and liberatory and unique to me and my authority. So again, it's one of those times where like having the astrological context has really provided me with some mental relief as I constantly am in my human design experiment. I'm taking these leaps of faith and leaps of faith over and over. And it's just like, sometimes I describe it as I'm just playing a game of chicken with the universe. You know, I'm just like, I've always been okay. I'm going to assume I'm going to continue to always be okay if I prioritize my peace and just trust that things will come to me as they should. So took it in a different direction again there. But yeah, I think it's maybe, it feels important to me to be transparent about that, because while I wouldn't argue that I'm like not incredibly blessed or successful in some ways, I do assume that a lot of people make a lot of assumptions about, my business and my success. And it doesn't feel not scary. It's just that like I don't let those fears rule me anymore, because I've seen the alternative is like have those fears but be okay and have peace, or be strung out, keep trying the things that have never worked that I know now are very much rooted in the conditioning of my not self, right? So yeah, I'd be happy to go back to reputation if you want, but let me just stop and see what's coming up for you.
I absolutely appreciate your transparency with that, because I think a lot of, I mean, Instagram in general, like we look at people, we see their lives and we're like, oh my God, they're living the life or whatever, but then to actually hear that, this was a leap of faith, and then sometimes there's debt and sometimes there's not. And people hearing that, I think, is going to be very impactful and important, for me and myself as well. That's one of those mental things that is so difficult for me to deal with, because I did go on the roof as a true fucking six line with fuckloads of debt. And so that is something that I'm working through in the best way possible. But like you said, I'm always protecting my peace, and that needs to come first.
Mm-hmm.
And there is,
yeah. It's like if we really want to divest from these systems that have run the show for so long, that's what I see human design as. It's like this every moment gradual divestment from the conditioning of the systems, the homogenized maps, if you will, and reinvestment into your differentiated map. But this differentiated map is according to form principle and passenger consciousness. So it means there's no promise of what comes out of it, and my innocence motivation is very much coloring the way that I'm conceptualizing this and sharing it, right? Because for me, when I feel most correct, most at peace, most surrendered, it has that like very classic feel of surrender that is innocence. That's like, it's a game. Let's see what happens. I'm just here for the journey. Like innocence feels very leap of faithy, right? It's kind of like fool card energy. So that's why I like love talking to desire people, because I'm like, surrender must feel so different for you, because I kind of think of our motivation as like describing the way our mind operates when we're a passenger rather than trying to be a driver, right? And so I'm like, it's so hard for me to fathom like the passenger via desire, because it's like the opposite for me. And desire being third color, it's like it's wants to get in the messiness of the Maya a bit, and this detachment of six color innocence is very like, I don't give a fuck about the homogenized maps. I'm just out here watching it. But anyways, I also just feel this strong sense of like response. That's why I like to be transparent about it, because as an Aries too, I'm like, we're each responsible. Like if I don't know how people can be, this might be a little bit unfair, but this is just how I see it at this point. I don't know how people can be so tuned into like political warfare and the structure of politics and globalism and capitalism and colonialism, and like watch it with awareness for any more than like 4 or 5 years and not realize that like there has to be some kind of incredible internal shift of divestment in order for there to be any hope of external organizing and external movement. And I do also recognize this is me. This is my nature. It's my role to highlight this, right? Like as an Aries, as a manifestor, as someone with a lot of individual circuitry, it's my role as defined ego. It's my role to like model in a way, or I guess bring heresy around the fact that like we don't get to the quote new world without experiencing this revolution within. Right. And so I think that's part of why I feel driven to share, because I'm like, I can't change anything outside of my own reality, outside of my own lived experience, but I'm going to allow myself to divest every day from these systems that I know are oppressive and these systems that I know are homogenizing. So if I know over and over again that like I do not trust the banking system, I do not trust the way that capitalism values things. That's not my truth. Then why am I going to press myself to have some kind of financial success or any kind of success or whatever, to fit into that system? Like, it just doesn't make sense to me. It's like that cliche phrase that everyone says, like the definition of insanity is doing something over and over and seeing that it's not working, So from my vantage point, I have power view. The power that we hold is in our own orientation to these systems and our own ability to divest and reinvest in our subjective reality. And so it's not all come at once. This is like a 10-year, I think, journey of me kind of realizing the need for myself to divest, and that focusing on success in that realm doesn't work for me. So I don't mean to say it's like easy or everyone should like quit their jobs and go into credit card. Like, no, I'm not suggesting that. Everybody has a differentiated way of moving through this massive transition that we're experiencing as a species. But for me, it's just like, it's kind of a no-brainer at this point. And I keep surviving and I keep finding more peace. And the stuff that I'm, quote, supposed to care about and supposed to be responsible about, like, continues to show me surprising ways that it'll work itself out, even if I don't tend to it the way that we're conditioned to.
I think as a desire motivation person, it's really, I know I was in James Alexander's analyst course and this came up because I'm a 6th line on the roof with desire motivation. And that conundrum is outrageously difficult to deal with sometimes. Totally. But when it comes to, we talk about the materialistic part of the 3rd line, and the only thing that is like on my trajectory net right now is like get rid of my debt. And when I say I had a lot of debt, I'll just be honest, I had $180,000 in debt when I burnt down my franchise. And that was a lot due to the fact that I had signed my name on a whole bunch of contracts, 3rd line fucking style or 1st line phase style, trusting, trying to prove myself, trying to overwork myself, all of these things, total not self shit show. And then ended up being, dragged to the roof and just like, oh, now you have all this debt, you're aloof as fuck and you have no energy. There you go.
Yeah, wow, that's such a good, like, that just that simple example and articulation helps me tap so much into like the experience of desire, motivation, and innocence transference. Because like for me, surrendering and being like, I don't know how this is gonna work out, like that is how I'm surrendered as a passenger, right? But for you being like, I don't know how this is gonna work out, I don't really care about the debt, that's this like fake innocence, right? Yeah. So it's so interesting to me, the concept of like surrender feeling like desire. But it's like, yeah, I think I see kind of innocence transference sometimes as this like, like fake aloofness, and also maybe like even like a passive aggression when it comes to relationships. So yeah, it's just cool to hear. And I love that you're bringing it up because I always am mindful of my impact as well. And I don't want people to take away from my story and my heresy and my upheaval that they should not care about their debt. Right. Mm-hmm. Because it's also not that I don't care about it. It's just that I know that an innocent approach and a trusting approach and kind of a detached approach is the only thing that allows me to stay in my own power and stay in my own sovereignty and stay in my own body. But it makes so much sense as a desire motivated person that you'd be like, this is the thing that I'm looking at, pointing to, and that I'm going to focus on. Yeah. And that's what surrender feels like to you. And ignoring that desire would be how your mind tries to pull you into resistance of some kind.
Yes, wholeheartedly. And it is interesting because it goes back and forth. Oh my God, does it go back and forth? And we get transferred all the time. It's just the way it is. Mm-hmm. But, I went to, a debt counselor, just see if there was anything he could help me with. I was like, I'm pretty sure he can't, but let's just go. Let's see. And I came in there with my spreadsheet with all of the numbers up to date, with all the percentages and la, 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 la. he's like, dude, nobody has ever come to this meeting this prepared.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, I know what I got my shit under control in a certain degree, but is there anything you can do, or is there anything I should be doing differently to move this away, And in the 4 past years, $100,000 of that debt is gone.
Amazing.
It is amazing. And I don't know how I've done that. That's the other,
Yeah.
don't know how, but it's just, that is the focus. That's where we're going. That's the desire. I'm motivated to get this shit out of my way. But when I'm done with that, I don't know. We'll see. I'm hoping that it will be done within the next 3 to 4 years. But there is this sense of just like, I just want to not be in that situation again.
Yeah.
See what comes.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking too about how like the potential of you clearing that debt out, which is like a forefront desire for you at the moment, that is specifically financial, but who knows, like once that's clear and it opens up the space for the next desire to make itself known, or the next major desire to make itself known, it may or may not have anything to do with finances. It might just open up space for you to desire something else.
Yes. And that's where the mind comes in and is like, oh, okay, we're going to be done with that. And then we're going to, it's like, no, one thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And in addition to you being a 6 line on the roof and shores and like kind of the contradiction of that with desire, I just got to say it has got to have been confusing and a very nuanced, complex journey for you to navigate the frequency of desire motivation, specifically with the 2 centers at the top of your not self hierarchy. The 3 centers, really, the ego and the G and the spleen, right? Like, yeah, that just sounds so complex. And again, that's why I love human design, because it gives you this slow process to understand the frequency of how that works for you. What does innocence transference feel like speaking to me through these 3 undefined centers? And again, to bring it back to one of your initial points, it's why we can't say shit like type should not. Because it's just like so much more nuanced and complex underneath that. And nobody can, like, our designs, AKA our vessels for how we register frequency in this reality, are so nuanced and complex and differentiated that like no one outside of you will ever have even the tiniest chance to attune to these frequencies the way that you're meant to, So we should whatever, heresy. We should really stop trying to like overly define what certain aspects of design should or shouldn't be doing, because nobody's design is the same when you look at all these layers. It's so personal.
Yes. That's all I have to say there. Yes.
Yeah. So is my business built on reputation? Probably more than I realize, but yeah, I guess just I have a lot of 6th color, right? Like I've got shores and innocence, and so yeah, there's probably something to that. It's reputation, but it's like this innocent like I'm not doing that on purpose. But I do have a defined G's, and I think it's a very interesting line of inquiry that I'm excited to like watch. So thanks for asking me that question.
Fun. Oh, Kelsey, I'm feeling very good about this conversation. Do you have anything you would like to add? Because I'm kind of empty for questions or empty for topics. I mean, I could talk to you for hours on end, but
Yeah. Have you had a hard time meeting with all these manifestors and like figuring out when enough is enough?
Yes.
I noticed that when I talk to other non-sacrals, it's like, can somebody tell us when we're done? Because I don't know.
And actually, I probably will cut this out. TMI. I've really started to notice that enough is enough when I start to like really get warm and sweaty in my womb area. And like around my thighs and vagina and butt, and like everything around there will get really warm and kind of sweaty. And then it's just like, okay, you've gone too far. Which is so weird, but it's something I've been noticing. It's a pattern I noticed. I'm just like, okay, that's a bodily sign. I guess I should kind of look into that.
That is really interesting. I feel like it's dissociation for me. It's like I start to go la, 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 la. But then it's like all hope is lost. So I still kind of either need somebody else to say goodbye, or I just need to like mute myself or just like end the call to interrupt the mental spin out. But yeah, so I don't feel any sense of completion beyond like, yeah, I don't have anything more that's trying to come up and out my throat.
Nice. Okay. How can people, or where can people find you, and how can they work with you now that you're going
Yeah.
to leave?
So the withdrawal is real, and that is included how and when I show up on socials. But the main social that I do use when I use it is Instagram, and I'm at Kelsey Rose Tort, Rose like the flower, Tort. And that's also my website, kelseyrose.com, which is sorely outdated. I'm kind of like taking a break from even websites lately. I've been just using Google Docs because I like a fresh start. Anyways, yeah, I'm about to disappear, I think, a little bit more fully as I approach my due date and welcoming the baby. But at some point, before the baby comes, I do intend to launch like an asynchronous student membership where I just have like a huge archive of both astrology and human design educational resources. It's a mix of like one-off workshops on specific topics, but also like full-on courses. So I am LYD certified, which means I can teach and have taught and have a course curriculum for Living Your Design, the foundational course. I have an even longer 2-level astrology course, freshman astrology and sophomore astrology, which are like the whole system from the beginning. And then beyond those courses, I also have one-off workshops in both systems, and they're great, but I never push them because I never really get the urge to go back and share them. But as I'm withdrawing more and like wanting to be less live accessible, I'm noticing that I have so much more fun working with people closely who have studied with me in the past, or who are already fluent in one of these systems, because I'm just like, I don't have much energy left for repeating the foundations over and over. So all of that being said, I put down one-on-one stuff for a long time, and now I'm finding that I actually really enjoy like the deep connection with a person one-on-one, but I only tend to have energy for it when we're not starting from scratch. And so part of my loose vision for how the rest of this year, 2024, might pan out is I'm going to launch this like asynchronous student membership sometime in July. And I think it'll probably just cover 3 months. So people can pay over 3 months, but they'll have longer term access to whatever they sign up for. I'll have different like levels of access to my workshops and courses. And then I think when I return from parental leave in the fall and winter, what I'm going to do is just set up exclusive one-on-ones, either like single sessions or like more mentorship packages. Oh, I should have introduced the new term that I like to use, experimentor. I'm a human design experimentor. So experimenting myself and mentoring people through their experiments. Anyways, yeah, I think I'll open up one-on-ones like as my way to kind of soften back into public facing work, but exclusively with people who tapped in on some level to my courses and stuff over this period while I'm gone, or people who have studied with me in the past, because that's just feeling way better for me to just be able to go straight to the point where people already know my frequency and they know I'm not going to bullshit around. They're ready for the upheaval. They're ready for the heresy. They know the way that I conceptualize and use these languages. So yeah, if people like resonated with the way that I spoke about things and are interested in learning a little bit or a lot of astrology or human design with me, look out on my website and on my Instagram for information about how to sign up for a different, whatever level of that student membership might be interesting to you. And then that would also be like, unless you've worked with me already, that would also be kind of the access point to maybe working with me one-on-one later. And then I have no fucking idea after that. But that's my loose agenda for the end of 2024. And you can also just like go buy those courses and workshops as is. But I think whatever I share soon will probably be a better financial deal. The
All
membership.
right.
Did that's my first time communicating that. Did I communicate it clearly?
I think so. I mean,
Okay.
do we as manifestors ever communicate clearly what it is
As emotional manifestors. This is what I feel like might happen, guys. That's the best I can say.
I know exactly how that goes. So no, I think I understood what you were getting at, and I'm pretty sure people will too.
I do have a podcast too. I forget that I have a podcast because I engage with it so casually, but it's called The Maya Games. That's my podcast.
Awesome. Well, I will link all of this below so that it's easy for people to find. And I'm just so grateful for this conversation with you, Kelsey. Thank you so much for coming on.
Same. Thank you for including me. And I'm excited about this whole project as well. Can't wait to hear all the manifestors talking.